All right, we try to get started on time and run the trains on time here at the Village Square. And I will start with a quick thank you to the team from Broward College. Both the audio and video had to come over here and set up in a different environment. And I want to thank you for doing this. Great job. Probably not very often when they say, hey, leave the auditorium and let's go to a pub and set up a little sound system, right? I hope you have a chance to enjoy the place a little bit later. All right, first of all, let me welcome everybody and thank you for coming to our 4th season of the Village Square, Chip. It's hard to believe we started this with David Armstrong 4 years ago in the concept of bringing the Village Square, and now it's kicking off the 4th season with a great lineup tonight. I want to thank County Commissioner Chip LaMarca, who has not only been a great member of the Village Square team, but a great county commissioner and a great representative in the city of Fort Lauderdale in the northeastern part of Broward County. So Chip, thank you for what you do. So we've been co-chairing this for the last 3 years, and as we kick off the 4th year, how many of you have been with us before? Let me see by show of hands. All right, about half the room. For those of you who have been with us, you understand how we work here. And one of the first things we tell you to do is don't put away your cell phone, pull out your cell phone. Because we ask you to tweet and Facebook and post and send out, whether it's Instagram, send out all the information you can about what we're trying to do here tonight. And the hashtags are hashtag Village Square and hashtag Broward College. For those of you that are new to the Village Square, again, we try to provide a safe and comfortable forum for civic engagement on matters of local, state, and national importance. And it was so cool to be sitting here talking to Senator Nan Rich earlier. We were saying, you know, I wish we had this in Tallahassee back in the days, early 2000 time frame when you and I served together. Because we elevate the issues here, we elevate the debate, but we don't elevate our voices. It's a educated and informed discussion. So we do this through 2 methods. The first is dinner at the square, which you're all at right now. And the second is Takeout Tuesday, and I think our next Takeout Tuesday is going to be coming up in November, and I think we're finalizing the plans for that, so we'll get into those details in a second. The debate here tonight is going to be spirited. It's going to be a healthy debate, a very healthy discussion, but it's going to be fact-based and it's going to be civil. And that's the way we do things at the Village Square. The Takeout Tuesday series are a little different. Unlike the dinner at the square, Takeout Tuesdays are free and open to the public, and we encourage people to come to the event, bring their dinner, bring their drinks, and have a chance to participate at a less formal, but just as educational and informational session. So hosting these events could not be possible without the leadership and vision of a few people. And I'm going to start with a gentleman that both Chip and I probably agree might be our best community builder here in the city of Fort Lauderdale, here in Broward County. And even going back to the days when Senator Rich and I were up in Tallahassee, an unbelievable champion of public education and higher education. That's David Armstrong. David, thank you for what you do. Also want to thank Broward College for just the whole team at Broward College. And, you know, you see Adriana and Kelly and everybody else running around here, but they do a fabulous job at Broward College and their trustees and the whole group. So thank you to Broward College for being the host and the sponsor of this. We also have a few partners in this event. This isn't something that it's been, you know, a few people. This has been a collective group effort. If I could ask those of you that are sponsors.
The trains are running on time outside.
Train is running on time. It doesn't sound like Brightline, does it, Chip? If you're one of our sponsors or partners or members of the Village Square, please rise so we can give you a round of applause. Year 4, you guys have got us. What you just saw with the people that stood, as you look around, you see a lot of tremendous community builders, you see a lot of community leaders, and you recognize why this has become so successful. It's because of those that have become members and have taken leadership and taken ownership of this Village Square. First of all, I want to thank our sponsor, Affiliated Companies. They are our prime event sponsor for tonight. Who's here from Affiliated? Thank you, gentlemen. Please stand. Don't just, you guys stepped up. Thank you very much. That's such a vague name, Affiliated Companies. What are you guys, like a hedge fund out of New York or something? All right, drinks are on the house on Affiliated Companies from here on out, the way this is looking. Also want to thank our event partners tonight, and both of them probably need no introduction, but let me ask them to stand anyway. Let's start with Rebuilding Together Broward County. Would they please stand? Robin Martin. Robin used to run our Hope South Florida. Might have one of the biggest hearts in South Florida. And then, of course, how do you do anything in Broward without Habitat for Humanity? I can't even imagine where we would be without them. Habitat for Humanity, please stand. Before I turn it over to Chip, a couple last announcements. Membership's only $68 for the year. That supports our mission, our programming. Members get to attend a pre-dinner cocktail reception with the speakers prior to the Dinner at the Square event. If you're interested in becoming a member, you may get the information as you go out the door tonight, or it's in the program that's on your table. And also a couple other partners I want to thank. One is the Greater Fort Lauderdale Alliance. Where's Maggie Gunther? I saw Maggie here. Maggie, exciting news today. We just announced another company with 300 employees staying here in Fort Lauderdale. So thank you, Maggie. Thank you, Alliance. That's how you get to a 3.9% unemployment rate. You stay out of Maggie's way. That's a good. And then secondly, the Broward League of Cities. Awesome effort by all the mayors and commissioners from Broward League of Cities. If there are any here tonight, please stand so we can also thank you for being a partner in this. I guess I'm the only member of the Broward League of Cities that's here, Chip.
There's a couple future ones in here, I think.
All right, with that, let me turn it over to the co-chair and to a good friend and a fantastic public servant, and he will lay out some of the ground rules for tonight's debate. Chip?
Thank you, Jack. So just a couple of quick thank yous as well. I did see Corrine Boutros from the Broward Workshop, one of our partners in a lot of these opportunities to bring and retain companies here. I want to thank her and her team of 105 great CEOs in Broward County. I also want to highlight something that is brand new. It kind of falls within this realm at Broward College that I had the opportunity to do yesterday. Where's Greg Hale? Right there. So Greg emailed me and said we're going to do a thing at one of our campuses called Pizza and Politics. So I'm in politics. I'm Italian, so I like pizza. I missed the pizza. I got there to do the politics part, but it was a great opportunity to work with the student government at Broward College. Great group of kids. Turned out that the president was a young female from that went to Northeast High School where I went. I asked her how she became president, and she said, well, I put in for senator, and they made me president. So you never know, Senator Rich. With that being said, I want to go over some of the ground rules for Village Square. Tonight we have our first dinner at the Square, and we're going to delve into another heated topic, affordable to whom? The affordable housing crisis in South Florida. But before we begin, we want to make a few announcements and tell you about the ground rules. Tonight we're talking about a topic that we don't necessarily agree on. So to keep the conversation civil and informative, I'd like to caution you against what we call team clapping. The county, we call that clapping in the commission meeting. When you clap, when your side says something you agree with, maybe give a little groan or you disagree. We'd like you to do neither of those. Tonight, we'd like you to challenge you to work hard and listen to both sides of the story. And just in case you need a reminder, we have our civility bell, which is in the hands of Adriana Facano, who is going to be a proud mother in about 6 months from Broward College. She's the chief of staff to our fearless leader, President David Armstrong. And we've asked her to particularly sensitive on either side of the aisle and ring the bell if she hears demonizing. You'd be ringing that thing all night if you watch TV.
Wait, can we get a sample of that bell ringing?
Excellent. And if that doesn't work, we're going to get the train to come back by. A portion of the evening will be Q&A, and there's a podium and mic in the back of the room if you would like to ask a question. So please be conscious of your time when asking questions. We want to get as many questions as possible. And here's a little hint. Make sure it's a question, not a statement. Lastly, I have the pleasure of welcoming our guest panelist and moderator for this evening. So please help me welcome our panelists. You've already heard one of their names mentioned. I'm honored to serve with her now, a former senator from the state of Florida, from the state Senate, now one of my colleagues in the Broward County Commission, Nan Rich. And I saw the commissioner look over when she heard the train. She lives in Weston, so she doesn't hear a lot of trains out there. It's right on the other side of that wall. The other panelist is a gentleman who is very invested in Broward County and downtown Fort Lauderdale. Jim Ellis from the Ellis Diversified Companies. That was the abbreviated version. Jim is the chair of the DDA, Friends of Birch Park, museum, a few other things, but very, very invested in our community. And our moderator this evening, very, very special guest as a moderator. Our moderator tonight is William Russell III, and he is with the Sarasota Housing Authority. I used to know him as Bill Russell when we were in Leadership Florida together, but since we were in Leadership Florida, he had a pretty special opportunity to be the interim, one of the interim assistant secretaries of Housing and Urban Development for the federal government prior to the secretary being sworn in. So, Mr. Russell, if we can get you to come up here. We're extremely fortunate to have you all here. Extremely fortunate to have you all here and encourage you to read their bios in your program book, as there's some incredible individuals. Now on to our programming. But before we begin our debate, we'll watch a short video from the Urban Land Institute. And again, thank you for your support. We hope you enjoy the evening. Take a look at the video, and don't be afraid to ask a question.
The need for affordable housing touches us every day. As we walk down the street and go into shops, walk into the classroom, we are meeting people who need to live in affordable housing.
I've been in residential real estate business for over 45 years, and I've never seen a housing crisis as significant as that exists in this country today. There are a lot of families that need a hand up to live in a decent place where their kids can get a good education, where they can access health care, where the parents can access jobs.
The face of affordable housing is changing. Families who had higher levels of income previously have been hit by some of the recession problems and are now at the very edge of stability.
There are currently 20 million families in this country who pay more than half their income for housing. There are 40 million families that spend more than 30%. These are families that are working. What we're talking about here is workforce housing.
Business leaders can be the key to success in having affordable housing be in communities. Not only is it about their current workforce, right? Can their current workforce get to their jobs? Can they stay in their jobs? But it's about their future workforce.
There's this disconnect between what people are making and what housing costs are rising to.
When we talk about housing, it literally is the foundation for things to work. It's the foundation for medicine. It's the foundation for education. It's the foundation for employment. And I think if there are ways in which we can have those conversations, we won't talk about it as, can we afford to do this? We'll talk about it as, we have to do it.
I think of it as an investment in the future of our country and an investment in the future of our families. And failure to make that investment, they not only will continue to be dependent on society, they won't add to our economy. In fact, this is something that's an economic issue in the long run. Only 1 in 5 families qualified for housing assistance are getting it. We need to produce new affordable housing. And we also need more vouchers for people to supplement their income to move into decent neighborhoods.
It is a community-wide issue. It's a community-wide conversation. We need our local municipalities working with the business community, developing those private-public partnerships to really identify areas of opportunity where investments can be made. Is this the right investment? We think it absolutely is.
There is no one-size-fits-all. The real effectiveness of affordable housing is when it fits seamlessly in the neighborhood and fills a need that perhaps the community didn't realize was there.
ULI members are real estate people. Having them understand this issue better can really be helpful. I'm hopeful that they can go back and sensitize their public officials and others to the need for us all to pitch in. It's an economic importance that we give all of our citizens an opportunity to become productive. You gotta have a decent home in a decent location, have a chance to prosper. That's what this country is all about.
All right, well, good evening. I'm honored to be here and on stage with our panelists this evening to talk about affordable housing in South Florida. And I want to open just with a couple of pieces of information that I gleaned preparing for this, just to kind of set the stage before we get into our questions for our panelists. According to Harvard's Joint Center for Housing Studies, they did a major study on a lot of the nation's top housing markets. And they gathered tons of data, both rental and ownership data, and tried to determine the level of people who are burdened, cost burdened. And they define cost burdened as someone who's paying more than 30% of their income towards housing. And they defined severely cost burdened as someone or a family or household who's paying more than 50% of their income on housing. So keeping that in mind, this study basically, and the table is all online, but South Florida, I was kind of shocked to see this. South Florida led the nation in the percentage of renters who are considered cost burdened at 61.5%. So just to put that into some perspective, San Francisco came in at 46.4, and this region's at 61.5. And this may be even worse. Likewise, South Florida also led the nation in the percentage of renters who are severely cost burdened, again, paying more than 50% of their income, at 35.4. So over a third of the renters in this area are paying more than half of what they're earning just in rent and utilities. So that's a sobering figure. And I also read recently a Sun Sentinel article on this issue here locally. Professor Ned Murray with the Metropolitan Center at FIU basically said that the median rents in Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami-Dade counties are out of reach for 80%, 78%, and 89% of renters, respectively. So that sounds even worse. So, overall, as the video pointed out, this certainly seems to be shaking out in the local data. it seems that housing prices are escalating, but incomes really aren't keeping up with that. And that's what's leading to people paying higher and higher percentage of their incomes for housing. So I want to turn to our panelists and ask a few questions. You know, the first question, I think, is what is the real impact of this affordable housing situation on South Florida? And why should those in the audience, especially those who are not directly involved in affordable housing, business and civic and education and community leaders, why should they be concerned about this, about affordable housing? You know, typically I think of affordable housing as kind of being this small group of government and for-profit developers who kind of toil away in doing affordable housing, and it's kind of not a big issue for the rest of society. But you know, why is this relevant for our audience here tonight? And for example, this kind of question came to me also. This goes to why should the audience care about this issue? But can a local graduate, say from Broward College, afford to stay in this community and work after they graduate based on housing costs? You know, that's just one example, perhaps, of the impact that this could have on this community. But I want to turn it over to our panelists.
Okay, I guess I'll go first. Why should everyone care? Because we all live in this community. That's why we should all care. You know, I got into this in a funny kind of a way. I had been in the legislature with my friend Mayor Seiler, and you know, we spent years voting to fund the Sadowski Housing Trust Fund. Subsequently, for many years, it hasn't been funded. I'll get to that later. But when I came back and was deciding to run for the county commission, I have a friend. I'm not sure if she's my friend or not, who convinced me to chair, to help rejuvenate the Coordinating Council of Broward, which is a group of government, business, leaders who deal a lot with human services in our community. And she said, would you come and chair it? Let's, you know, see if we can rejuvenate it. So I said, okay, I'll do it. Little did I know at that time that the #1 issue that we would decide to tackle was affordable housing, affordable workforce housing. Cindy and I hired a young woman who's here tonight, Sandra Vesey Einhorn. Where are you, Sandra? She's back there. She's the executive director of the Coordinating Council, and little did we know that her expertise was so heavily into the area of affordable workforce housing. So all of these things have kind of, you know, come together. And then I got elected and decided that this would be kind of my signature issue for the county commission. I will tell you that it's not surprising to me at all, the statistics you threw out, because we had the benefit of having the United Way's ALICE report presented to us at one of our first meetings. And if those of you, any of you who have not read it, who haven't looked at it, ALICE stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed. So these are people that have very little assets, they have low wages, they're employed. And we found that the numbers were astronomical in our community. And just to mention a few, we have actually 44% of our population is considered ALICE. And as I said, these people are asset limited, income constrained, employed. Just to give you an idea, the annual poverty level for a single adult is $11,770. The survival budget, which includes things like housing, childcare, food, transportation, taxes, and so forth, is $61,000. We have over 44% of the people in our community that are considered the Alice population and absolutely cannot meet that level. They fall either at the poverty level or a little above the poverty level, but cannot provide all of these services and things for their family. So, and this was done statewide, so and I think it's important that it's not, even though South Florida is the worst in the country, and it is, if you look at the Harvard Housing Study, if you look at other studies, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach makes up the worst metropolitan area in the nation for cost burden and severely cost burden. That's 30% of their income on housing, and severely cost burden is 50% on housing, which people just can't do and survive. So we took this and decided, as I said, to make it our #1 issue. And I would say, in answer to what William's question was, that the #1 issue here is that when you look at a place like San Francisco, which people think, oh, they're much worse than we are. They're not, because their wages are much higher. And what you gauge it on is your wages and your cost of housing. We have low wages and high cost of housing. San Francisco, on the other hand, has higher wages and still high cost of housing. So they're not as severely cost burdened as we are. So when you ask the question about whether or not college graduates can afford to live here and to buy homes or rent even, the answer is no, because again, we are one of the most cost-burdened, we are the most cost-burdened metropolitan area in the country. So I'll start with that and give Jim a chance, and we'll come back to some of the other.
So thank you. Why should we care? First off is we are currently about 70,000 units in the low-end affordable housing behind in Broward County alone. 70,000. And we don't have any programs in place to tackle this. The federal government most probably isn't going to make any significant changes. Certainly that's not really going to tackle our problems in Broward County. The state, which has the Sadowski funds you'll be hearing a little bit more about tonight, but basically has collected about $1.8 billion in funds and has swept 1.3 out of it just to spend on other state purposes, not affordable housing. So that's about $500 million left, of which if they divvy that up, Broward County's really not going to get that much to make a significant difference. So that leaves our two biggest potential contributors not contributing. And so the problem is going to be, left up to us to decide how do we tackle it, meaning Broward County and the 31 cities within Broward County. And can we do that by going to the state and asking for legislation? And if we do, what's our potential success? How long is that going to take? What are we doing in the meantime? And so, we have to keep this dialogue going. We have to keep the conversation. We have to make some decisions that we can now to start the process. And, like Senator Rich said, can a college student come out and afford to live most probably where they want to, downtown where there's a lot of action and stuff. And the only way they can really make that work is if they have roommates or they get into some of the micro units, which there are some that are currently under construction, and that would be, say, about 500 square feet. So, there are some opportunities, but they're certainly not what are considered when I came out of college and what I could do. So, the main reasons we should care is there are no programs in place. We are so far behind. There are so many people moving into Broward County on an annual basis. And what we're going to find is, Broward County's main engine is tourism. And tourism is run by the service industry. And the service industry is basically in the affordable housing range. And a lot of them, they can't live near where they need to come, the beach. It's too expensive. And so now you tack on another 20 to 30% and travel cost. And that's factual. I'm sure there'd be, you know, more numbers here, but they will have to live out west. And so their travel costs to get into where their jobs are and everything else is very difficult. And that phenomenon happened in Key West probably 20 years ago. And so none of the service industry could live on the 4 mile square radius island of Key West, and they started having to bus them in. And sometimes from Dade County to get them in to do their jobs. We're going to see the same thing happen here. And we don't need to if we keep the dialogue open and we start, excuse me, getting some programs in place to start tackling this problem.
Just before you go on, I just want to just throw out some jobs that really connect to affordable housing. Because you always hear about the service workers in the tourist industry. That's true. You hear about teachers. But I want to just say, these are some of the groups that the ALICE study showed are in this category. Clerical staff, mechanics, legal aides, city workers, people who work in our hospitals, doctors' offices, therapists, transport, people who sell Florida produce around the state, people who work in daycare centers, public and private schools, libraries, even sometimes our colleges and universities. So we are talking about a broad spectrum, and one of the things I always say to people, and that's why I'm so glad to see people, you know, who might not be that familiar with this topic here tonight, because it is an education campaign that we need to run in this community. We've been very successful through the Coordinating Council of Broward to bring in some of our business leaders. We have the Greater Fort Lauderdale Alliance and the Broward Workshop now as a part, as well as Broward College and NOVA and some of the others that really are now not only understanding the issue, but participating. The Alliance actually funded was one of the funders of the Housing Summit that we did in Broward this year, where we brought together people from all over the community to talk about what we could do. So I just want to say that it's important for people to realize that it's so many people within our community that are a part of this population. And very often people do mix it, you know, with public housing. But I will tell you, one of the things that they are finding is that we need to have mixed use. We need to have mixed income levels in our housing, affordable housing. We're looking at that in Fort Lauderdale. On Andrews Avenue, there's going to be a development there, related group. And that will have people from different income levels, not just all one income level or another. And that helps with the whole education process. So I just wanted to, you know, to add that component to it. Thank you.
So it seems clear there is a shortage. Jim, you mentioned 70,000 short. So I guess my question is, you know, the government can't build 70,000 units. So in most development, obviously, is done by private developers, home builders. What would it take for either the local government or state government or even a combination of the two to create enough incentives? Okay, not, you know, we can talk about maybe requirements and stuff like that, but incentives to get a developer who could otherwise build market rate housing, given the cost of construction and everything. What could we do to provide enough incentives to get developers to willingly build more housing that's affordable to those making less than our area median income?
It's a tough question to answer in a couple sentences because there's so many facts that are needed to, figure it out. But basically, as you've heard before, one of the main problems is our salaries are so low compared to what the rents are. So if you now look at that as to a developer, to get a developer involved, and let's say most developers are in business for about 5 years. So it's not a business that is really successful. It's tough to make it. And if you look at the developers that, and my thoughts, you're going to have to do a lot of units. So density is key here to get some things going. And there's really just a handful of developers that are successful for larger projects, meaning mid-rise and high-rise. And in order to make that happen, it's bottom line. And how do you make the bottom line? There's many ways. You can go do a project within the CRA zone and potentially get some money for that. But it starts, basically with the location and land. And think about this. In Broward County, we're virtually out of land, and we're going vertical. And you start vertical where the demand is, which is downtown or closer to the beaches, and that's where you really get into significant cost. So in order to do density, you're going to need to do the density where demand is, and hopefully where you can keep the transportation local, or so there's not additional transportation costs. And in that vein, there is opportunities for the county and some of the cities that do have land that could put the land into a project, as well as there are areas where there are parking garages. We're still, when you look at doing a project, the average project and an affordable, you're going to need at least 1 car parking per unit. And you have to add that cost in. It's almost you just kind of figure it as a land cost. And so, that in a garage, structured garage situation is give or take probably about $25,000 additional cost. So I can go on and on. It's a cyclical business. The demands are going to be here because of the unit shortage of 70,000. But right now, today, our land costs have recovered. They're the highest they've ever been in areas where there's density. And construction costs are the highest they've ever been. So you start adding all this up, and as a developer, you're going to look at it and say, if I'm not going to be able to get the rents, and in downtown Fort Lauderdale, they're exceeding $3 per foot. It's huge. To where to make the numbers work for the workforce housing, you're at about $1.60 per foot. So you're almost half of what developers are able to get for market rate. And so as a developer, you're going to say, well, okay, I want to make a profit. There's not that many developers that are going to be community-minded that say, well, I'll make a smaller profit because I'm community-minded. I want to, help give back. So, it's, how do you make that incentive when the market's right? Like right now the market's hot and developers are going after that but it's cyclical. It is for the banks, it's for the land cost, it's for the construction costs, and so it's a wide open question. There's so many things with that. But I think one of the big things is the land, and having the cities, the 31 cities and the counties look at their land and be part of the deals, or P3s, public-private partnership, and or how we can. There are some banks that do some low interest rates and work with those, and so there are ways to do it. So, but right now today is tough.
He's hit a lot of the points. I think basically the issue of the land and the high cost of construction, of course, and it's going to be exacerbated by the hurricanes. Because if we're looking now at the numbers of people that are actually moving up here from the Keys because there is no affordable workforce housing there now, there's practically no housing in a lot of areas. We have that to contend with. And then we have a significant group of people, American citizens, I might remind everybody, coming from Puerto Rico. And that will be another impact. Orange County, Dade, and Broward probably be the three biggest counties that will be impacted by that. You know, I think our county, before I got on and now continuing, our planning council is promoting some incentives, I think, that are good. The market rate is something I mentioned with the Fort Lauderdale project, that is more market rate in exchange for building affordable housing units. That's one way that people do it. Reducing impact fees in different areas, some people have suggested. I know that the school board is looking at increasing the amount that they give in terms of helping people with affordable housing. So everybody, you know, there are different areas, but I want to just say this. There's really only one way to address this, and this is with money. Money. You need money to build. And when we talk about the Sadowski Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the trust fund was created in 1993. So collections have been $5.9 billion in dock stamps over those years. Anybody want to hazard a guess as how much has been swept out of that? Over $2 billion, okay? So when you think about that, this trust fund was created so that the money would go into the trust fund, go through the Florida Housing Finance Corporation. Monies would be given out to all the different counties for different purposes, whether it's multifamily, rental, whether it's new housing, whether it's renovations and repairs of existing housing, but that money would come back out. Anybody want to hazard a guess how much we've lost that we have not gotten in the last 5 years at Broward County? Okay, well, it's $73 million, almost $74 million was swept out and went wherever the legislature and the governor wanted it to go. So that's one of the biggest problems. I sit on the, I was appointed to represent the Florida Association of Counties on the Affordable Workforce Housing Workforce Group. It's a statewide group. We're going to meet 4 times. We're meeting October 30th for anybody who wants to come in Miami at the Marriott, Airport Marriott in Miami. This is the 3rd meeting. And we are coming up with recommendations that will go to the governor and to the Speaker of the House and the Senate President. And the #1 recommendation has to be full funding of the Sadowski Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And I will tell you, it's a large group of people that are on this committee. At the last meeting, everybody, the developers, providers, realtors, bankers, everybody that's on it, with the exception of 2 people, agreed to that. It will be a recommendation. But unfortunately, because the legislature and the governor have gotten used to, since 2003, having this as kind of a slush fund, they're not too interested in closing that loophole and making sure that all the money goes. So we're going to have to really focus a lot on that because we really need that. The other thing we need is, in Broward County, is equity in funding. And sitting on this work group, I've learned a lot. And I've asked for information so that I could prove that Broward County was not getting its fair share. So one of the things is a chart that shows the large county percent of units compared to percent of cost burden renters. And it won't surprise anybody that Dade obviously has the highest percent of total units financed in large counties, and they have the highest percent of cost burden renters. But when you look at this, we are actually below Hillsborough, Duval, Miami-Dade, and Orange. we get less and we have a more cost-burdened population. So this is, part of what we're looking at to make sure that we get what's fairly ours. The other part of it is, if you look at total active rental units financed by Florida Housing since 1982, we again are the lowest of 6 counties: Duval, Orange, Hillsborough, Palm Beach, Broward, and Dade, and we get the lowest percentage. So this, and I am so thrilled about that we've finally shown them the Harvard Housing Study, because the Harvard Housing Study is based on need, okay? The study that the center that they use that creates the numbers for the Florida Housing Corporation is the Schimberg Center at the University of Florida. And they do a good job to a degree, but they don't base their figures on need. So their outcome is different, their data is different than the Harvard study. So I have urged us to now look at more than one study so that we can figure out how to come up with a percentage that is accurate for all of our counties. But to me, we can nibble around the edges with land use and with permitting and many of the things that Jim mentioned, and we need to, but we need to have the money to build the units.
Well, staying in that area though, municipal fees such as impact fees, connection fees, and permitting can really add up to a significant amount of per unit costs. And then after the development is built and occupied, the developer is going to do their pro formas again to figure out rents versus operating expenses, and taxes come into play there as well in terms of long-term, cash flow and what type of rents could be charged. So what could be done in terms of lowering some of these local fees for affordable housing purposes, and then also on the ongoing operating side, what could be done on the tax side again to give a little bit more incentive and lower those costs to help bring down those rents?
It's a pretty wide open question, but as far as, I'll use an example of a project that we recently got unit approval on in the city of Fort Lauderdale, downtown Fort Lauderdale. And it's about 360 units. We're figuring somewhere around $3 million in different permitting fees, whether it be through the building department or some infrastructure work, et cetera, that we need to get done. And there are about 6 different fees within the city and county that covers that. And to go in and think that we're going to be able to work with education and get that fee removed, or to go in for infrastructure, which we're all hearing about now, and get that reduced, or the actual cost to these cities, which is what most of these things are. It's a cost to the cities of our units coming down in there. We need to make the sewers bigger. We need to bring more water lines in, and make sure that there's adequate fire and police, as well as education, so on and so forth. So it's really, when you look at it and say it's a burden to developers, it's a burden to the city. So somebody's got to pay for it. And to turn around and say, well, we're going to take those fees away from the developer really means that you're going to either force the city to tighten up their budget or to raise taxes. So it's a burden that should be on us. There are other things, with say that project itself, the 360 unit project, we're looking, the county doesn't always have their numbers right, but somewhere between $3 and $4 million on the annual property taxes on that. Is there something that the county would want to look at to say we want to lower some of those fees? And again, it goes right back to what does the county want to do with the millage and everything else. So again, I would say that's really not an incentive. It could be for developers, but it's really not overall. The county should be taking their money, keeping the taxes the same, and taking the money and saying we're going to use a portion of what we collect and set it aside to where we can do some positive programs. As a developer, if you're gonna come in and say, we want you to do a project that is incentive for the actual tenant, then, it's different. Then you could be part of that. But for most of what we're hearing, around the county, they're looking where they want about 15% of the larger projects units to be within an affordable rate. And to do that, because the construction costs are so high and the land costs are so high, it does make a significant difference, and it also makes a very significant difference to the banks. When you go to the bank and say, we have X amount of units that are 15-year restricted, they don't like that number or name when it comes to, what we can rent it for. So that opens up another host of problems. But, back to, ways that you could do it if you were looking to do a public-private partnership project. Obviously, the land cost, the parking costs, and how, there are parking garages that are empty on nights and weekends. In the city of Fort Lauderdale, just in the downtown area, there's over 6,000 county and city-owned parking spaces that are vacant on nights and weekends. And they could partner up with developers. They could really utilize those spaces and make it a lot cheaper for developers to do it. So, the permitting fees, I don't think is a great way to go at it. As far as the reduction in property taxes, again, the county should take that and go figure out how to use it if they will. So, sorry, but there's a whole lot of different ways to look at this.
Well, I'm going to give a different perspective. Chip, where are you? Is Chip? Yeah, okay. So I'm really proud of what the county did, and we did it unanimously. And for the first time ever, we have a dedicated source of funding in our budget for affordable workforce housing. So thank you. It's not as much as I had wanted, but we're getting there. So it's a commitment of $5 million each of 3 years. And as the community redevelopment agencies sunset, that 50% of that ad valorem tax would go into a dedicated fund in the county. And that would actually benefit the cities because it's, the affordable housing is in the cities. So if we could get the Florida Housing Finance Corporation to be fairer, and to give us more projects, we take that $5 million and we can use that for match money. We can use it for any one of those 3 areas that I mentioned. And it will, finally give us a start in having the county make that commitment to a dedicated funding source. I think, I just think that I look at California. California has passed an unbelievable number of bond issues. Los Angeles, this past year, passed a $1.7 billion bond issue. Alameda County, which is where Oakland is, passed a $580 million bond issue a year ago. And San Francisco's got one coming up in the next election. But let me tell you what happened. So they have a lot of money, but the legislature just passed a package of 15 bills to remove barriers and reduce permitting logjams so that they can use the money, because they can't use it because of all the barriers that are out there. So it has to be, a balance, but I still go back to the point that if you don't have the money, you're not going to be able to resolve the problem.
So, Senator Rich, you touched on, Broward now having a dedicated source to help fund affordable housing development. One thing I know about Florida housing, you mentioned Florida housing, there doesn't seem to be a recognition that local governments are stepping up and committing their own funding to these deals, and they're not necessarily recognizing that they could leverage that and have their own investments go further and actually see that there's public investment locally in some areas of Florida. And then you also mentioned the Sadowski funds being rated, if you will, for other general fund purposes. What could we do just as a community to try to convince, A, the legislature not to sweep that because there is such a need to build affordable housing, but number two, how to get maybe Florida Housing to recognize communities like Broward to say, you know what, if you're putting in your own investment, whatever it is, 10% of total development costs or whatever, we're going to recognize that and score those apps higher than a county that's not putting any of their money into affordable housing. So what do you think about that?
You make a good point. This is something I learned at the last meeting, that the Florida Housing Finance Corporation basically does, awards their projects by lottery. Okay? Now, this is, you know this. Basically, everyone's projects score a perfect score when they come in. So developers were sitting at the table saying, we put in 10 projects. It costs $75,000, $100,000 to prepare one of these projects. So if you're a developer who can do that, put in 10, you get 10 chances at winning versus a not-for-profit like Carrefour that actually just got a project in Wilton Manors. It's a senior housing project that they're going to be doing, which is excellent. But they can't afford to put that kind of money in. It's enough for them, to be able to do one. Willie Logan, who used to be a state rep, he helps with the housing in Opelika right now in Dade County. They can't afford to put all of those, projects in and pay for them. So the whole process is not fair as far as I'm concerned. And they did recognize it at the last meeting because a lot of people never even realized that this is what was happening. It's just it's an unlevel playing field, especially for not-for-profits. And a lot of our not-for-profits, Habitat for Humanities here, do a great job with affordable housing. So that's going to be changed. They have made a commitment to change that. Now, I will say, as far as the other, when I spoke with the director, she said, oh, we're excited. We didn't know Broward was putting in that money. But you're right. Now that has to make an impact. I don't want to make it an unfair impact because there are some counties that are poor. They're fiscally constrained and they can't maybe come up with that kind of money. So there has to be a balance there. But there shouldn't be a situation where somebody can put in 10 different projects and get 10 bites at the apple where somebody else is only getting one. So the way it's scored has to be changed, and they are looking at doing that now. But as far as the Sadowski, listen, last year there was an unbelievable press conference with the Board of Realtors and all the Sadowski Coalition partners to try and convince the legislature to keep that money in housing. You know what? I'm sorry to say it didn't work. About $135 million was swept last year. So we need to try and prevent that from happening again this year. And maybe some of the issues with the hurricane may make a difference because people are going to realize that there's even a greater need. And also going back to the economic development, the economy, and business. The business leaders, certainly in our community and other places around the state, are realizing, what a critical problem this is in recruiting and retaining employees. So we're hoping that, when the business community weighs in, that will be an important component of the advocacy to try and keep the Sadowski money where it belongs.
So I think, your question had a lot of political background as far as, how do we get the politicians to give the money or assist us in the program, give the money they've already taxed us for, assist in the program. And that's not my area of expertise. However, I know that right that, per what the county's showing as far as their affordable housing program right now that is in place, there, I'm just going to go for through 2022, there is approximately $100 million that will be coming in, and of that, there's going to be about 2,800 affordable housing units built. And so if you take that out over a 20-year period through fiscal 2037, I don't know the total numbers, but financially, but the units that are going to be added through 2037 is 11,227. We're not keeping up with the demand, the annual demand. So our 70,000 units will grow. So the current programs that are in place aren't even keeping up with our demand. Very important that we educate our legislatures that. And I look at, I don't know how the laws are written, but I look at the $5 million that Broward County, and it's a great first step. They're putting it out there saying, we realize this is an issue and we want to start tackling it. Can they take some of that money and hire some experts, and whether it's lobbyists or people who can do the factual numbers and really get the story out there? I don't think of the 2 million residences in Broward County, you probably, 5% are aware of this problem. It's just not advertised, or it's just not marketed well, and so, is the burden of, or part of the burden as a resident of Broward County, should that be on us, and how do we get that message out? In personal opinion, yes, it should be us that are assisting in these programs, and should we be taxed more? Should we be part of some sort of bond issue? Yes. Thank you.
But let me just say this. In my opinion, Chip can speak later about it, how he feels. We have enough lobbyists. I don't want to spend the $5 million on lobbyists. I want to spend it on housing for people. Match money to bring down those dollars. And Fort Lauderdale has come up numerous times tonight. Fort Lauderdale is not the only city in Broward County. It happens to be the largest one and has issues with housing and homeless, just like lots of other cities do. We need to, that's why I say it's an education campaign. We have some other cities that are doing some decent work, Pembroke Pines, there are a few cities, but we need to engage all of our cities in being a part of this. There are many cities that are along the transportation corridor, which is one of the places where we're looking at to put so that people don't have to have cars, that they can actually, live close enough to the tracks. I haven't heard them in a while, actually. But, I just think, and I will say, this is just a start. If we could get the Sadowski money and the fair share from the Florida Housing Finance Corporation that we should get, these numbers would go up dramatically. But there is no county, including Dade, that is building more housing. No one is catching up because we don't have enough money to catch up. And Dade has its own ability to keep some of their dock stamps. That's something that was passed, and they are the only county that got it. I tried for a long time in the legislature to get Broward to have the same deal, and they closed the door after Dade County. And you can see why, because they want to use that money for other purposes. So even though it's our dock stamps, every time there's the real estate transaction, that money goes in, Dade gets a portion back, or doesn't send it up at all, and it's automatically there, and we have to send all of ours up. And I've asked about, it's possible that we could sue the state or something, but the truth is it's a statute. It's not a constitutional amendment. Not that constitutional amendments are always implemented properly either, but you have a better shot. at that. So, you know, we're going to have to work within the system. But, you know, my feeling is that we're going to have to do more here. We're going to have to put more into the pot. But we need to get more of our share, our fair share from Tallahassee.
Okay, so at this point, we want to open it up to the audience and see if we have any questions from the audience. There's going to be a mic in the back of the room that you can go back there and ask a question. And again, we would like to hear, as was mentioned earlier, a question, not necessarily a statement or a sermon. But there might be some issues that we haven't covered yet, so I'd like to hear anything that you want to hear discussed.
Good evening. I'm Steve Worthman with Hope South Florida, and I also serve on the board of the South Florida Community Land Trust and the Broward County Homeless Continuum of Care Board. And I had an item come across my inbox that I believe Senator Rich alluded to, and I want to thank both Senator Rich and Mr. Ellis for all the work they've done promoting affordable housing in Broward County over the years. But in terms of a affordable housing trust fund, which I think is a great idea, and the Charter Review Commission appears to be considering that, I had the opportunity to read a draft resolution, and I guess my question was about the composition of the board. Primarily, the income level goes up to funding projects up to 140% of area median income, which is needed. And there's a lot of representation by developers in the business community, but my experience is that when it goes up to 140%, which I think is about $100,000 for a household of 4, that's where all the money tends to go. The group we work with is about 30% of area median income. They're lucky to make about $30,000 with a household of 4, and there's everything in between in that 70,000 cost burden households in Broward. So my question is, could there be consideration in addition to the developers and business community for there to be advocates for lower income persons on that board to try and help guarantee that it penetrates down to that level as well?
Okay, well, thank you for the question, Steve. And I'm going to just be very blunt about it. I am not in favor of that particular piece that there's a subcommittee of the Charter Review Commission has put out. It creates another advisory council. We already have 2. The people that are on it are the same people that are on the Housing Authority, and we have the Broward Housing Council. It is totally unnecessary. It's not only the 140, it doesn't mention about special needs. There are a number of groups that would be left out in that. We're looking at some people that are trying to move up to go to 80% of AMI, which is like, well, they don't even list, yeah, it's about 60,000 income, which comes closer to the Alice report of what is a sustainable budget. So I think, given our tremendous needs, I'm just against putting that in the charter, to be honest with you. You know what, we need flexibility. Funding sources may change. We may not have, money put in the way it is right now from those sources. There may be other sources. And it ties our hands, and it also is duplicative of what we already have, and it doesn't address some of the populations that really need to be looked at in terms of affordable housing.
So also on that, you know, the extremely low, or 30%, which I heard, is the maximum household income is basically $23,000, or the monthly rent limit for a 2-bedroom would be $514, or about 64 cents a foot. I don't know how you're going to get that done unless you get the funding through the state, or the burden of that is pretty huge. And as You know, it goes all the way up to the workforce housing, of which, you know, the maximum household income can be $106,000. And the rent can be up to $3 a foot, but basically that would put you in a unit that is a very small 2-bedroom unit or below 1,000 square feet, and that's how that works, is you get into the smaller units. And at the end of the day, back to, you know, where there can be some give in this is, you know, for the current average unit size in a rentable product, 2-bedroom is give or take about 1,100 square feet. When you go into the high rises, they're a little bit under 1,000 square feet. And the developers are building smaller square footages, and what we're finding is there's a lot of people that are roommates situations now. If you go into Flagler Village, a lot of the buildings in Flagler Village have roommate situations that are not partners. They're just making it work. So the market's changing for the demand of how they can make it work, but yeah, the extremely low income's a difficult one to do. I did through the Florida State program, a 104-unit project, which is about the sweet spot number. You can't do much above 110, you can't do much below 90, or the numbers just don't work. And why they have it that way, I don't know. And it was essentially done for us to get out of a piece of property when the market crashed. It was really not profitable for us. So therefore, I don't know why we'd go back and look at doing something like that again. So the programs that they currently have in that do, there were out of the 104 units, I believe 4 of them were market and 4 of them were required to be extremely low. So there just wasn't that much of a you know, unit count for the extremely low.
Hi, my name is Corey Meltzer. Thank you guys for your expertise and sharing it with all of us. My question is really about the other side of the equation when you talk about the ALICE statistics and the difference between the housing rates and what people are earning. One question that I kept thinking about was, what are we doing in Broward County to increase people's wages and their standard of living so that they can afford the housing that's here? Obviously, we need to do both. We need to be building more affordable housing, but if we can increase people's standard of living and their wages, they're able to do a whole lot more, not just in the housing area, but in other areas as well. So I was wondering what Broward is doing in that respect, which could have ripple effects in many other areas, including housing.
Well, I guess, you know, we need to do a lot more is the answer. The county itself focuses on living wage for airport and seaport and contracted agencies. It's lower than Dade's, so that's, you know, something to be looked at. I will tell you that when I talk to some business people, what happens is that they end up increasing wages and the amount that they pay people to recruit them here. There's a private jet company. I was talking with the owner at an event, and he told me that he had to pay so much more. He was recruiting pilots, and they lived in Minnesota. And when he recruited them to come here, he had to pay them much more than they were making there. It's about our cost of living, you know, and cost of housing and transportation and all the other things. So it is something we all need to, you know, to work on together. I mean, the truth is, you know, the minimum wage is too low, and we're trying to address it through living wage as far as the county is concerned. But it's, you know, it's definitely an issue that needs to be addressed. We know that we're the most cost burden because of low wages. So the answer is you need to increase your wages. So that's, you know, that's something we need to all work on together.
All right, hello. I'm Brandon Cerrijo. I'm the Vice President of the Political Science Club at South Campus and a member of the Model United Nations at Broward College. my question starts off with the United Nations statistic from the United Nations Development Program stating that 60% of people around the world will be living in urban areas by the year 2030. Now, in response to that, the United Nations has been researching different forms of sustainable housing that is not only affordable but also environmentally friendly. So what is the county doing to create, or do they have any plans for developers or to incentivize developers to create environmentally friendly housing? Because we can create any type of housing we want, but living in South Florida, we directly see the effects of climate change. So what is the county doing to ensure that we can reduce our carbon footprint and our effect on the environment?
That's our student. So as a developer, there are, you know, when we put together a project, when we put together a project, you know, we look at all the numbers from the land cost to construction cost to marketing cost to interest, you know, I mean, there's a whole smorgasbord of numbers. And obviously, one of the most important numbers is the construction cost. And in the construction cost, you know, you always start out at a high number, and then you do all your cost cutting where you remove a lot of windows or you change glass balconies to railings, and I can go on, but you lower the cost of the buildings. So environmentally friendly basically would put you into a LEEDs type of building, and a LEEDs building has different levels of the environmental, your certificate that you get from it. Virtually no developers will go do a LEEDs project unless their lending institution requires it. And it's strictly a cost deal. It strictly comes down to the bottom line. And it's done a lot more in office buildings because there's more flexibility to get it done there. But for the residential, it's just not a standard practice, and there is no incentives, there's no requirements, there's no legislation, there's no permitting, there's nothing that requires us to do that.
I would just say, as far as the county goes, buildings that the county builds are, again, look at being LEED buildings. I think the most important thing we're doing is we have a wonderful environmental protection department. Dr. Jennifer Hirado heads that up. We're part of, yes, we're part of a compact of South Florida counties that are working on all the climate change issues. And yes, we use that word. You can ring the bell, use climate change issues. And sea level rise. We're having a big 2-day summit, December 14th and 15th at the Broward Convention Center. I invite everybody who's interested, and everybody should be in this topic, to come. We'll have incredible speakers, and it'll all be looking at you know, issues of our changing climate, sea level rise. A lot of the cities, I mean, like Fort Lauderdale, a lot of cities are dealing with seawalls and, you know, trying to prepare for the eventuality of the sea level rise. So, which we're seeing, you know, parts of that now. So, you know, as I said, I think we have a climate change task force. We have a plan that we're working on for the county, looking at a whole range of issues from solar and, again, sea level and all those different areas. So we're pretty active in that arena. And if you'd like to come up front here, and my aide Stephanie's right here, and you can give her your card if you have one, and we'll be happy to invite you to come and join us at a climate change task force meeting, which I happen to chair.
Thank you, Ryan Ryder, longtime proud advisory board member of the Village Square. Thank you so much for taking on this really complex issue. Believe it or not, my friends and I, Sandra being one of them, talk about this issue a lot. and it does deal with wages, and it does deal with transportation, infrastructure. You know, wages being one of them. You know, you mentioned that Miami-Dade County has a higher living wage. That also increases, I'm in construction, it also increases our construction costs, which we then pass on to the owners, because at the end of the day, we have people we need to pay, we have, you know, families we need to feed as well. But one of the other things that we haven't really touched on, we talked about a little bit, was transportation. I know that the county is going to be possibly going for another penny for transportation. Would you be also willing to to agree that affordable housing can be coupled with transportation? I know it's a very funny legal language, but if you say, you know, building affordable housing along these transportation corridors would be part of a solution.
Well, I think that that is part of the solution, and our planning council already is looking at that, and we're looking at providing incentives, and some of that money would be used, you know, for that, you know, to join those two things together, the money that the county has and then eventually the transportation tax, which I do believe the commission will support putting that on the ballot. I hope it's on for 2018 because we desperately need it. My personal opinion is I was not on the commission when the two issues were coupled last time, which I think was a big mistake. We would have already had the transportation tax if it wasn't coupled. And I would like, personally, I will vote to keep the tax separate so that we can get the transportation passed. And I think, you know, as I said, this is a start with affordable housing. I'd like us to consider a bond issue like many other communities have considered that would be for affordable housing. But definitely, there has to be a nexus between transportation and affordable housing.
All right, so I don't. Well,
I'm so glad to hear a county commissioner say that last statement, the nexus between transportation and affordable housing.
I think we have one more question. We'll take one more question.
Hi, I just have a question. How is affordable housing going to stop or fight against gentrification? How are your policies going to fight against gentrification, specifically in areas like Miami, where it is like a major issue?
That's a good question. I can say that, you know, one of the uses of the Sadowski money that comes is for repair, renovation of existing housing. That's the only amount it's kind of the only area that I think has, you know, money at all would be to do that, would be within the affordable housing Sadowski money, because it does include that. Oh, and home, I'm sorry, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, home, I think home funding, which is federal funding, and maybe CDBG block grant also has a component for that. But if you're talking about like big public housing units in terms of gentrification, I don't think that the money, you know, that we would have available is going to be able to be used for that. So it's a good question, and I don't really have an answer.
All right, at this point, I just want to give our two panelists just an opportunity to maybe if either one of you just want to give a closing thought or comment before we wrap up, you're welcome to do that now.
You know, I think that meetings like this are great. We need to figure out how to keep the momentum going. We need to figure out how to get more of the public involved, more of the public educated. We need to figure out how to get more money into the program. You know, affordable housing is really, it's a real estate deal with subsidiaries. We need to figure out how to get some of that. The locations, you know, we know where the demand is. We need to put the demand coupled with transportation, you know, and if that's putting more pressure on getting Tri-Rail into the FEC line sooner. There's already some great studies done of where the FEC or Tri-Rail on the FEC line stations would be, and there's properties around there, and if I was a lot younger, I would be aggressively going after that. And I think that the cities within those properties and the county should be looking at that, you know, now and get ahead of that. You know, there are answers to this. There are ways to tackle this. There are, you know, there's 3 acres of prime property down on the New River in the city of Fort Lauderdale that's just sitting there. And there's a 2,200 parking garage right next to it that's virtually empty during nights and weekends. And as a developer, I would love to do a public-private partnership, and it's profitable. I've done the numbers on something, putting in, you know, 1,500 units that could be workforce. And so there are ways to start tackling this, but it's going to take more of meetings like this and putting people together and really educating people and start to make some positive moves and show people that it can be done.
I just want to thank you all for your incredible attention this whole period of time and your ideas. And if anybody has suggestions, ideas that you haven't thrown out to us, please feel free to call my office. Stephanie is here. Give us your card. We'd love to talk to you about it. You know what? The more people we can get involved, the more people we can get committed to this issue, the more ideas we'll have and the better chance we have of solving it. So thank you very much for being here.
All right, thanks again for your interest in coming out tonight. That's going to end our program.
Thank you, everyone, and we just want to say thank you to our co-chairs, our panelists, our moderator. We have a few gifts to give out. We really hope you enjoyed tonight's series, and we hope you join us for our next event, which is actually a Takeout Tuesday dinner, and the topic for that is homelessness in Broward. It's on November 8th. And then we'll meet again, and we'll see you in February for a free market for education. Following free market and education, we will meet in March to talk about the job skills gap, April for the right to die, and then May 2nd for open primaries. So please, if you're not on our mailing list, see me, Nicole, or Kelly. We'd love to send you our messages, and we're really thankful for your time tonight. Thanks. Have a great night.